Hi everyone, great to see you all. Let me tell you a little story. So, when I was about 4, maybe 5 years old, my grandfather, he taught me and my sister a phrase in Revitalization, the southern Sami language, as a jest. It means, roughly translated into English, kiss my ass. And just like any other kids would have done, me and my sister, we blurted this out all over our preschool for weeks. Must have been a quite funny sight, and no one could understand a single word of it. Now, those were the only words of our original native language which were passed down to me. I didn't think much about it, seeing as neither of my parents spoke it, and my grandparents only knew a few words themselves. I only started thinking about it, reflecting on this, once my childhood was over. The year was 2008, and I was 19 years old. And just like most of that age, I was starting to reflect on who I was, where I came from, where my roots came from. So I started asking questions. First to my mother, who I quickly realized didn't really know that much. And then when I had worked up the courage, I asked my grandparents outright, what were our connections to the Sami people? I remember how they looked at me in sort of a surprise, and then they simply said, yes, we're Sami. Just like that. And it had been their parents who last spoke Southern Sami, the last original native speaker, my madraka, my great-grandmother, passing away in the middle of the 1990s. It was then that the language died in our family. But something clicked inside me then, something that had not made sense before, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. I suddenly realized where my grandparents actually came from, why they made traditional Sami handicrafts out of reindeer antler, wood, leather and tin thread, why they knew the lands like the backs of their own hands, and so many of the old stories from the mountains, why they had their ethics in regards to the lands and the animals dwelling within. Their hunting, fishing, gathering, traditional cooking. But as far as I knew, and still know, no one in our closely knit family had up until that point in modern times outright said, we're Sami. When I looked back into our family tree, I saw Sami families stretching as far back as to when the church records were first recorded in the 1600s. Let that sink in for a bit. More than 400 years of ethnic identity wiped away. Why didn't I know anything about this? Why did next to no one I spoke to know anything about this? Why had it not been part of our curriculum in school? I reckon even most of you who are sitting here today know very little about us, the indigenous people of the North. Why? I spent the next 15 years searching for answers. And although this talk is far too short for me to tell you the whole story, I will do my best to put my family's history, my history, in a historical context for you. But first, let's take a look at a map. So this is Sámi, the traditional cultural area of the Sami people. Never a formalized nation, it's been connected by the formally 11 variations of the Sami language. It has had its own religion, livelihoods stemming from trapping, hunting, fishing, herding, handicrafts and arts. I read that up until sometime during the 1700s, the Sami language was probably in majority in most of this area as well. And by all accounts, we've been around for thousands of years. So my family was in Västerbotten before the time of the church records. They lived as nomads, following the migratory patterns of animals throughout the turns of the seasons. And as Sweden started building Christian schools, marketplaces, and churches, they slowly started to turn away from their old shamanistic religion. Now it's important to note that we Sami were a recognized, although mostly ignored, part of the kingdom for those roughly 200 years. Sami were messengers, trading partners, wilderness guides, craftsmen, and taxpayers. You see, recognizing Sami as Swedish citizens and having them pay taxes to Sweden was a strategy that the Swedish crown applied to stake stronger claims in the north. And as part of this, Sami of that time had hunting rights recognized on par with the nobles, were exempt from sending soldiers to fight in Sweden's many wars, and even for a few short years during the 1700s, had a couple of seats in the Riksdag, the Swedish parliament, set aside for them. Although no one really knows if they were ever used or if anyone bothered to tell the Sami people at that time that they actually had them available. But the message was clear. Sweden wanted Sámi to become part of the kingdom and to claim the north, were ready to at least give a measure of respect to the Sami people. Now this all changed during the 1800s. Sweden was pushing settlement policies hard, trying to entice people to start cultivating farms in the north, to gain access to the rich natural resources of these regions, as well as to secure Sweden's borders against other nations. Ideas about nationalism, social Darwinism, and the so-called white man's burden started seeping in from abroad. And with these thoughts, Sami started to be seen as more primitive, uncivilized than before. With these ideologies came policies of forceful Scandinavization in both Norway, Finland, and Sweden, especially with the establishment of mandatory school in which the Sami language was forbidden. Kids who broke the rules were punished, sometimes beaten, or even denied food. And they all had to live away from their families for an extended period of time. Many Sami during this time chose to settle down and abandon their nomadic lifestyle, although it's uncertain how much of a choice it really was. You see, the terms were extremely agreeable, for instance being tax exempt for 20 years. And it also meant that they received papers with formal rights to the land where they had for generations been taking care of the land, cultivating it, using it. And even though they settled down, many of the Sami at that time, they complemented their incomes, their farming incomes, with traditional livelihoods. And nomadic and settled families lived side by side, often intermarried, traded with each other, and basically helped each other survive in harsh climates throughout long, dark winters. But caught up in colonial ideas, Swedish politicians and civil servants chose to disregard any previous recognition of Sami rights to the land. Instead, they settled on the idea that nomads can't own land. And in the acts of division of property during the end of the 1800s, the Sami people were robbed of the lands that they had been paying taxes for more than 300 years. The right to protection of property, as is written in the Constitution, did not apply to us. Additionally, Sweden backpedaled on the land they'd appointed to be settled, confiscating no less than 2/3 of the land for the crown. The largest expropriation of lands in the history of Sweden. And then came the racial biologists, motivated by ideas of white European superiority. They measured, weighed, and categorized us according to their views. They stripped kids, adults, and elders naked, took photos of them, and put them in their archives. They classed my family as half-breeds. They wrote books and papers and attended prestigious events, flaunting their adventures in the savage north. In the same way, my people suffered 3 additional huge blows. The first was the successive closure of borders to Norway, Finland, and Russia, prompting Swedish authorities to force the relocation of northern Sami families to the rest of Sápmi on the Swedish side, because reindeer herding, cross-border reindeer herding, had been stopped, a tradition that had been ongoing for 500 years or more. This ripped apart families and communities and also created new conflicts where these families were forced to relocate to. Secondly, special nomad schools were instituted to segregate reindeer herding Sami kids from everyone else, providing subpar education and dreary living conditions to preserve their natural wildness. And third, in 1928, the Reindeer Husbandry Act formalized that Sami who didn't live off reindeer herding exclusively had no indigenous rights whatsoever. That is about 90% of the Sami people in Sweden. And in one fell swoop, we were disqualified from our ethnic identities because we didn't live up to the narrow-minded ideas of what Sweden considered pure Sami. Protests from Sami groups fell on deaf ears. The generation who grew up then learned to not speak about their heritage, to simply accept what had been told to them, that there was no future in being Sami, that our heritage was something shameful, a lower quality of human. What would you choose in this situation? To step up or fall in line? Is it really a choice? Now that was the Pandora's box I opened throughout those years. Layer upon layer of trauma until there was only silence left. And yet, here we were, still hunting, still fishing, still crafting, still telling our stories. I took note of how my grandparents had lovingly rebuilt one of our old family's Sami abodes on the edge of the mountainside as now a communal area for the local community. I started working for a local Sami association, meeting others who were searching for their roots just like me, trying to find out what so many of us had lost. Revitalization in the making. Still here, still Sami. Fighting for the rights of kids to learn their native language. Fighting for the rights of elders to receive elder care with Sami cultural elements in them. Resistance against destruction of natural habitats which our culture is reliant upon. Researching, designing, debating, making music and films, writing books, sowing small seeds of knowledge throughout the population of Scandinavia, hoping to make a change for the better and becoming more recognized with every year that passes. And with this, I grew. I became the then youngest representative to the Sami parliament, and in 2 years I had advanced to become party secretary for the largest party in the parliament. My grandmother and my mother sewed me a gapti, the traditional Sami garb, and I started learning Southern Sami, stumbling my way through it, but keeping it up slowly through the years. And I kept doing what I do best, researching, writing, debating, trying to put Sami questions in the forefront whenever I could. And I got to meet so many other indigenous peoples from around the world who are struggling with exactly the same issues. I got to meet so many and know so many amazing people who are working, spending their free time, their lives, trying to build a future where Sami indigenous culture is seen as an imperative part of Sweden, where both kids and adults have the right to learn their own language and learn their own history. A world, a future where there will be no shame in saying, I am Sami. And that is what I wanted to give you today. A seed of hope that might grow into something more powerful to mend some of the damages that have been done in the name of progress. For as I see it, we are all but threads in the grand weave of the world, stretching between those who came before us up towards those who will come after us. I want to give you the opportunity to choose. We get influenced by both smaller and grander things, nudging us towards different futures. This is my nudge, giving you the opportunity to choose instead of simply reproducing the gap of knowledge of previous generations, to give you the opportunity to ask yourselves, how might we build a better and more sustainable future together, knowing all this? And to say to all of those like me, who grew up in a family that was forced to assimilate, that it's okay. You have a right to your heritage and it is yours for the taking. We are all needed. It is a long and arduous journey, but you are worth it. For every single word of Sami you learn, for every stitch on the garb, for every place name and story, you build yourself and your future, our future, together. And to those who still spread hate and fear, to those who trample across Sápmi in search of profits, and to those who wish our common history together to remain in the shadows, well, now you too know exactly what to tell to them. Kiss my ass.